Morning, everybody. Todd Peters here from West Catholic. Shout it on the Hilltop, episode 3. I have a very special guest here today. We have Mr. Murray MacGready. Welcome, Murray. How you doing?
Hey, welcome. Yes,
Right,
I'm
exciting.
doing well.
Doing well. Good. Good to hear. Good to hear. Is it raining profusely by you?
Yes, yeah, I'm up north, and it's been raining. It started raining last night, and it's been raining pretty steadily all morning, all day. And what is it now? 1 o'clock. It's still raining. That's why if you see me look over to my left, I'm looking out the windows.
I think I want to open it up for you to talk about. You've had such a great career at West, a great teaching career. Looking back, as for those of you who don't know, Mr. MacGready here, Murray, this is his final year, and he's retiring after the school year. Looking back, just I don't know if you want to take a moment to reflect on that, what it's meant to you.
Well, I've been doing a lot of self-reflecting over the last few months, especially with the situation that we're in now, with the pandemic and being put into quarantine like this. One of the highlights of teaching, of course, is working with young people, and of course, the situation that we're in now has changed that drastically. I moved to Grand Rapids. I'm not from Grand Rapids. I'm not from the West Side. I moved to Grand Rapids in 1992. I had been working at Northern Michigan University in Marquette, Michigan, and it was time to make a change. And I actually got hired at Catholic Central. And so I'm at Catholic Central my first year. And again, I had family in GR, but I really was not too aware of the schools and the legacy of the schools. But that fall, the boys swim coach job position opened up at West Catholic. And a friend of mine mentioned that to me. And so I went and interviewed with a great guy. And I was very fortunate that, in the early 90s, there was still a lot of the old guard of West Catholic, I guess, were still around. And I interviewed with a man by the name of Jim Schaefer. I had a good conversation, and lo and behold, I got hired. And I've always said that was, the good Lord looking out for me, because that's what got me over to the West Side. And I coached swimming at West for roughly 20 years. And that was my foot in the door. Bernie Stanko came over to West Catholic as the principal. There was a change that took place, and Bernie had been at Catholic. And so through that connection, when a job opened up in the 96-97 school year at West, I applied. And again, by the grace of God, I got it. And as they say, the rest is history.
Over 20 years of coaching swimming, best memory?
There's too many. Really too many. I guess start with the boys team. When we finally got over the hump of where swimming was considered a real sport again at West, and our numbers started to go up, and I started to get more athletes to participate. Jason Tidd, Tyler Heitzman, from some names from the past. They were football players, and it kind of made swimming cool or acceptable again. And so we got our numbers up. And of course, with the numbers being up, it made us more competitive. And I guess that's probably the best memory, is having teams that had numbers to where we could be competitive.
How did you get into swimming? Was that a passion of yours through high school?
Yeah, my mom got me started in swimming when I had a lake incident of struggling in the water when I was a really young kid. So back in the day, I took swim lessons at the Y. I was fortunate enough to go to a high school that had a pool and had swim program. So I learned, I took swim lessons. I took life saving. I took water safety aid classes through the Red Cross. I took water safety instructor classes through the Red Cross, which kind of made me the right fit for Wes at the time because I have a lot of background in teaching swimming. But I was also a competitive swimmer. I started swimming competitively when I was in 6th grade. I did, back in those days, it was AAU programs in the summer. I did that. I swam all through high school. I walked on at Northern when I was a freshman. 2 of my friends from high school were swimming for Northern. The coach was pretty honest. He said I was more than welcome to swim with them, but they had a tight budget and I wouldn't be able to go to meets. He couldn't guarantee me if I would get to swim. I was decent. I qualified for the state meet when I was in high school, but I never placed, but I qualified. So, I knew my competitive swimming. So that, that's kind of my background.
What events did you swim?
Primarily distance freestyle.
If you had to say what you think the hardest or most grueling race is as a swimmer, what would you classify?
Grueling races are probably your distance races, and in high school that's the 500. In the college level you have an event called the 1650, which is that's pretty. Those are grueling, I guess. When it comes to fear or sheer physical ability, it's the individual medley. The IM. That's where a swimmer has to swim every competitive swim stroke, that race in its own is very strenuous, I guess. If you're familiar with the Olympics, Michael Phelps is a good example of a guy that can do those
decently well.
Yeah, decently
right.
well.
Yeah. From a teaching standpoint, what is your favorite part of the day as a teacher?
I always like the morning. In all honesty, I'm not really a morning person, but the people that know me know that I'm usually at school pretty early. It's kind of nice to see the kids in the morning. Usually everybody's kind of fresh and got a good attitude. One of my favorite things to do, and I'm really going to miss this next couple weeks, I'm really going to miss this, is standing out in the front doors in the morning with my cup of coffee and, saying hi to everybody as they come into the building in the morning. And the last 2 weeks, because the seniors are almost done. And, those last 2 weeks, having those conversations in the morning, I'm going to miss that.
If you can give advice to the new teachers that are coming in from all your experience, any nuggets, things that, maybe somebody told you when you started that you really held on to, or something that you've learned along your career that you're like, this would have been great information if I was starting out?
Go to lunch. In all honesty, go to the teacher's lounge and go to lunch and hang out with your peers. Do not isolate yourself in your classroom. There is nothing that you have to do in that 25-minute period that is more important than you having a relationship with your peers.
It would be something interesting that you think people might not know about you, that you like to do. What do you like to do? What do you enjoy? What do you do in your downtime?
I like nature. I don't think a lot of people get that. I do like going, getting out. I do it on a motorcycle, but I wish I could flash you some photos. I got my bike out Sunday, and we're right here on the edge of the Pigeon River country, the Pigeon River State Forest, and this is where the Michigan elk herd is. And that's what we like to do. We like to go putting out in the woods and go looking for deer and elk. And the very first day I was out on my bike, again, a blessing, beautiful. It was in the mid 60s and sunny, and on one of my back 2 tracks, and boom, there's an elk, probably 20, 30 yards away. They don't like people very much, so long enough for me to get my cell phone out and get a picture. I'm a big hockey fan. Probably a lot of people know that or don't know that about me. Many years ago in my previous life, I was a maintenance supervisor for Northern Michigan University at our physical education building, and this is where our ice rink was, our practice ice rink. I was a Zamboni driver. My back in those days, they found out I grew up in Swartz Creek, little farm. I got tractor experience. One of my supervisors found that out about me and asked me if I wanted to learn how to drive the Zamboni. I said, sure, because really all it is a big tractor. And so I learned how to be a Zamboni operator, which advanced me very quickly at Northern. I became what was called a building attendant, maintenance supervisor, and I was the maintenance supervisor for the ice rink. Because of that, that was Northern Michigan University's practice facility. And also the Marquette Redmen, high school hockey, a lot of hockey programs, but Northern. And so I got to know some of the Northern players. Some you might know, Dallas Drake, who played for the Red Wings for quite a while, but a lot of the guys from the 80s I got to, get to having a relationship with, not like became big buddies or anything, but I got to know them. And so I started following hockey and I started learning more about it. Learning more about hockey and the art of hockey. I started actually skating a little bit and learning how to play a little bit. And, and I follow college hockey, and, I'm a Griffins fan.
From a college hockey standpoint, who do you root for? Who's your team?
Northern
Michigan.
Northern?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I'm not a fair weather fan, but, I like to, I follow programs. Like when Ferris was doing so well a few years ago, and they went all the way to the national championship. One of the nice things about being in Grand Rapids with following Northern is that, like this year, I took a road trip up to Big Rapids and watched Northern play Ferris. And there's an old barn. I got hold of some of our graduates. That's one of the things one of the nice things about teaching out West is you do develop relationships with kids. And so, I met up with some of our graduates that are going to Ferris and had dinner with them. And then I went to the hockey game. And then, Northern plays at Ferris, they play at Michigan State, and they play at Western. And those are all, easy commutes, from Grand Rapids. So, I've stayed in touch.
What would you want to say to the students? Anything you want to leave them with? Anything you'd like to say to all the kids?
Oh, a long time ago, someone told me, and it's a cliche, but it's so relevant, that you only get out of your educational experiences, and this is high school, this is college, but you only get out as much as you put in. And if anything to the kids is to realize that school, in a way, it's your job right now. And yeah, West is demanding. And West, we ask an awful lot from you as a student, and it's for a reason. And you need to raise up to that occasion. And I'm dyslexic. I didn't learn that I had dyslexic processing issues until I was in college. And I know that for me, it takes me longer to do stuff. And, one of the dilemmas in high school is that everybody's different at their learning level. And you're going to have friends that get through stuff really, really quick where you're not going to be able to. And if I could encourage you as a student is to put the time in, realize that you're going to have to put the time in. And the more effort you make, the more you're going to get out of it. And if you don't, it's going to be harder as you move forward. And I guess and I tell that to my kids all the time, but you have to put the effort in, you have to put the time in. And if you do, then there are great rewards. There are definitely great rewards. Would
you rather watch baseball or football?
Baseball.
Michael Jordan or Mike Ditka?
Then
fries or pizza?
Pizza.
Motorcycle or car?
Motorcycle.
Isaiah Thomas or Michael Jordan?
Oh, Isaiah.
Is it? Did you watch? Have you
Well,
watched the
just said
series?
that.
Have you
On
watched the
Detroit.
Have you watched the
No,
series?
no, I hope to,
I would say
and watching it.
I would say it's better rain than snow, right?
Yeah, I still have snowbanks here.
Really? Oh
Yeah,
man,
they'll probably be
I couldn't
with
believe
all
about
the
a week
rain
ago it
we
was like,
had.
yeah, about right. About
Very wise person from my past, told me, sometimes the right thing to do is be somebody's hero. You don't know what a student or even a parent or what a family is going through. You may not know. And sometimes we hold on to what we assume our perception, what we assume we want, we want to see this, and kids may be struggling there. A family may be struggling there. And sometimes you got to just, look back and kind of, what's the right, and I don't know the right way to say this. He said it better. I think sometimes you just got to be the hero, be somebody's hero. And that's not being big things. Sometimes being someone's hero is a very tiny thing. It might just be saying hi or just, having a small conversation, just recognizing someone. I have been blessed to have had a career at West Catholic. I'll be honest, back in, in the 90s, that was not my plan. To be sitting here now and saying that, I was almost at West for 30 years. That was not the plan. And, Lord works in mysterious ways. And, like I said, I've been blessed and to be there as long as I've been there. And, what a community. I'll just say that too. What a community. To watch that Project Falcons group come together, basically building our community, built our football stadium. Hands-on built our football stadium. And how many communities in the state or even in the country can say that? And the magical parents, over the years, the number of parents and their commitment to West. It's a unique. You don't get it. I don't think people will ever get it unless you actually become part of it. And both my stepkids went to West. I try to encourage all of my, anybody I know. I try to encourage them to go to West. It's not just the academics; it's just the community, and it is something special.